Welcome back to Silent Husband Club. We know it's been a while, and we're sorry for the long silence. From now on, we'll do our best to bring you a new story every single day. What if one single kiss could shatter 12 years of marriage? What if the taste on your wife's lips no longer belonged to you, but to someone else? What if the truth didn't scream, but whispered, subtle and cold, until it swallowed everything? Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. It helps our channel grow, and it ensures you never miss what comes next. It was the kind of evening that was supposed to mean nothing. The ceiling fan turned lazily above the kitchen island, pushing stale summer air across spotless countertops. The digital clock on the oven glowed in soft blue, 8:56 p.m. outside. The streetlights hummed like bored insects, throwing long shadows through the half-closed blinds. The neighborhood was sinking, as it always did after sunset, into its slow, predictable quiet. I washed a wine glass. Not because it needed washing, but because my hands needed something to do. The hum of the dishwasher filled the silence at my back. The house was too clean. Too quiet. The kind of silence you don't notice until someone points it out, or until it suddenly feels unnatural. Calculated. Chosen. Then the garage door groaned. Her steps followed light, measured, the steady rhythm of sneakers on tile. I turned with a forced smile already stretched across my face. "There you are," I said, my voice too loud. Claire stood framed in the doorway, bathed in the soft glow of the ceiling light. Her ponytail clung damply to her neck, her cheeks were flushed, and her leggings fit her like a second skin. On any other night, I might have thought she looked radiant. But there was something in her eyes, something that tightened my throat. "Hey, love," she said, dropping her gym bag by the counter. She stepped closer, looped her arms around my neck, and pressed her lips against mine. My body reacted instinctively. I kissed her back. And then it hit me. Barely noticeable. Subtle. A strange, salty aftertaste. Not the clean tang of sweat after a workout. Not the faint sweetness of her usual lip balm. Something else. Foreign. Wrong. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. But my chest locked as she pulled away and began chatting how intense the class had been, how the trainer pushed her to the limit, how her legs had turned to jelly. I nodded, even laughed at the right moment. But I wasn't really listening. All I could think about was that taste. I turned back to the sink, washed the glass again. Behind me, Claire leaned against the counter, rummaging in the fridge for water. My hand trembled slightly as I dried the glass. She didn't notice. "Sweetheart, could you grab me a protein bar?" she asked. I walked to the pantry as if on autopilot. Her voice sounded the same. Her smile, her routine, everything checked out. Everything but my gut. I handed her the bar and watched as she tore open the wrapper, chewing contentedly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her mouth half full but her eyes holding a flicker of doubt. "Nothing," I lied too quickly. "Just tired." She smiled, brushed my arm as she passed. "I'll shower before bed," she said, disappearing down the hall. When the bathroom door shut, I stood motionless in the kitchen. That taste still lingered on my lips, and I hated myself for recognizing exactly what it reminded me of. But I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Because saying it would make it real. Instead, I turned on the faucet and let steaming water run over my hands until it almost burned. For the first time in 12 years of marriage, I didn't know if I had just kissed my wife or a lie. The next morning, the air in the house carried something unspoken, thick, like fog that refuses to burn off even under the sun. Between the hum of the coffee machine and the faint birdsong outside, I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in a quiet that once felt peaceful but now pressed down like a weight. Claire moved through the room with her usual elegance, her hair still damp from her shower, her skin glowing. She looked exactly the same. And yet I saw her differently. She poured almond milk into her cereal bowl 2/3 full, just like always. Phone in one hand, spoon in the other. A small smile flickered on her lips as she scrolled, maybe a meme, maybe a message. Nothing unusual. And still, I couldn't stop watching. Her thumb pausing on the screen. Her lips curving into that hard little smile, the one that used to be mine. Something dark stirred in my chest. She caught me staring. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice bright but cautious. "Yeah," I said, sipping my coffee. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a rock," she replied, stretching. "That class wiped me out." "Which one was it again?" I asked, casual. For a split second, her eyes flickered. A reaction so slight it could have been imagined. Then her answer came, smooth, polished, spinning with Saskia. 10 miles in intervals. My legs are on fire. I smiled. Saskia, the crazy one. Claire laughed. The one and only. I nodded, but inside, I filed away every word. I didn't even know why not yet. But something had cracked, and my mind was already seeping through the fracture, sharp and restless. That afternoon I sat in my car far longer than usual after arriving at work. My hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving, all my eyes fixed on the dashboard as if the blinking lights could give me answers. The thought of last night kept intruding, her kiss, that unfamiliar taste, the flicker in her eyes this morning when I asked about the class. I told myself I was being paranoid, that 12 years of marriage couldn't be undone by one strange detail. And yet, deep down, I knew paranoia wasn't the word. It was instinct. I reached for my phone, almost without realizing it. My fingers hovered before opening our shared calendar. There it was, her spinning class, neatly typed in, just like she'd said. But something gnawed at me. The timestamp. Added at 6:12 this morning. Not last night. Not yesterday. This morning. I stared at the screen until my pulse quickened, telling myself it could be nothing, she might have simply forgotten to add it earlier. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them tremble. During my lunch break I caught myself replaying the past few weeks like an unspooled film. Random details stitched together, fragments that suddenly connected where I hadn't thought to look. Last Thursday, she said she went for drinks with colleagues, but she came home late, smelling not of wine, but of a man's cologne. 2 weeks ago, she rediscovered her passion for yoga after years of insisting it wasn't her thing. 3 nights back, she wore new lingerie to bed, only to turn away and fall asleep without a word. Each of these alone could have meant nothing. But stacked together, they bled into one another like ink stains, spreading across the surface of my marriage. That evening we sat together on the couch watching an old comedy we'd both loved for years. Claire laughed, resting her head on my shoulder, her fingers drawing slow circles on my arm, just like before. As if everything was unchanged. But my eyes weren't on the screen. They lingered on the faint mark at the side of her collarbone. A bruise, nearly faded, but undeniable. I froze. She noticed my gaze. "What?" she asked lightly. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just admiring you." She grinned, kissed my cheek, and turned back to the television. I stared into the flickering light, my heart beating slow and heavy, because I wasn't admiring her. I was trying to figure out whose hands had left that shadow on her skin. The silence between us shifted in those days. It wasn't loud, wasn't filled with the threat of arguments or slammed doors. No, it was precise, calculated. The silence of a scalpel, sharp and deliberate. It sat in the corners of our rooms, watching, studying, waiting. By the third morning, I could no longer pretend. Claire was in the shower, her humming drifting through the closed bathroom door. I stood in our bedroom, my eyes locked on her gym bag sitting perfectly placed on the bench exactly where it always was. Her routine had become unnervingly meticulous. The same bag, the same orange-topped water bottle, the same navy towel folded 3 times, no more, no less. It didn't feel like habit anymore. It felt like a script. I crouched down and opened the bag carefully, moving nothing out of place. Inside, leggings, sports bras, half-used deodorant, protein bars, and a small bottle of mouth spray. Nothing unusual, except it wasn't her usual brand. This one carried mint and eucalyptus. Ordinary enough, until my mind snapped back to that first night, that bitter, foreign taste beneath the mint. My throat tightened. This wasn't for freshness. It was for covering up. I didn't touch it. Didn't need to. Just looking at it was enough, as if the spray itself whispered, confessing silently, waiting to be discovered. The water stopped. I closed the bag and returned it exactly as I'd found it. A moment later, Claire emerged, steam curling behind her like smoke, a towel wrapped around her. "You're up early," she said, drying her hair with that easy confidence, the confidence of someone who still believed she was invisible. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, forcing a thin smile. "Coffee's ready." She nodded, beaming. "You're the best." As she brushed past me, her scent clung to the air. But it wasn't the perfume I knew. It was heavier, earthier. The smell of skin pressed too long against skin. My chest constricted, but my face remained still. I didn't react. I recorded. That day I sat at my desk, staring at spreadsheets that dissolved into meaningless shapes. Words and emails blurred to background noise. My mind refused to stay tethered. Instead, my fingers opened a new browser tab. They hovered, hesitating, then began to type, mini spy camera car installation. My pulse hammered. Hidden audio recorder. Phone cloning app reviews. Search results filled the screen like accusations. I stared at them, disgust tightening in my stomach. This wasn't who I was. I was the man who trusted. The man who built, who never snooped, who never doubted. But that man had kissed his wife and tasted another. That night, after placing an express order for the camera and microphone, I walked into the garage while Claire soaked in the bathtub, humming like a woman at peace. Her car stood waiting, innocent beneath its film of dust. I opened the back seat and carefully fitted the camera beneath the center console, angled perfectly but nearly invisible. No thrill. No rush. Just a cold, steady click as it locked in place. Later, lying beside her in bed, I listened to her breathing grow slow and even. I stared at the ceiling, empty. I wasn't seeking revenge. I wasn't hungry for drama. I wanted only one thing, truth. However it looked. Whatever it cost. Lies have a taste, a smell, a weight, and I was done pretending I couldn't sense them. The tiny camera blinked once, silent, obedient. I tested the live feed on my phone, crystal clear image, audio acceptable, motion detection active. There was nothing left for me to do. Claire would reveal herself, not the version she showed me, but the one she thought hidden. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Like a man sharpening a blade without knowing if he'd ever wield it. The next morning, when she kissed me goodbye, she looked perfect. Her hair tied neatly, her lashes dark, her lips brushed with soft rose. "I'll be home a little late," she said lightly, slipping her car keys into her gym bag. Thinking of doubling up tonight, spinning in hot yoga. Ambitious, I answered with a smile. She laughed. Gotta sweat the week out somehow. Then she left, without touching me again, without turning back. I went upstairs to the window, watching as she pulled out of the driveway. 3 seconds later, my phone buzzed. The camera was live. Her music blared, she hummed along, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. No nerves, no hesitation. Just ease. That was the most unsettling part. For the next hour I tracked her GPS. The little blue dot moved east. Past the gym. Past the smoothie bar she always mentioned. Past her favorite yoga studio. My chest grew heavier with every mile. Then she stopped. In front of a small medical complex. 3 offices, 1 door without a sign, dark glass windows. I zoomed in on the feed. The name etched into the side, Cole Performance Clinic. It hit me like a shard of glass. She'd mentioned it months ago, professional sports therapy, she had called it, so good for tight muscles. Professional. Right. The camera feed wavered, showing only the parking lot. Then her voice drifted through, light, playful. Hey, you. Miss me? A man's voice replied, deep, assured, always. A hand entered the frame, tanned, rough, resting briefly on her thigh as she slid into the passenger seat. The kind of touch that doesn't ask permission. That knows its place. She laughed, soft and intimate. I barely slipped away, he was up early. That was me. I leaned back in my chair, heat flooding my ears, the room closing in around me. The rest of the audio blurred, clothes rustling, laughter, then a long silence. Until finally, her voice again, clear, sharp, he has no idea. The feed cut off. Battery saver. I sat motionless, phone clutched in my hand. My heartbeat slowed, but not into calm. Into ice. This was no suspicion anymore. No shadow. No guess. It was confirmation. She wasn't stumbling into betrayal. She was dancing in it. And I had just lit the first quiet match beneath her perfect stage. I didn't sleep that night. Not because exhaustion hadn't crushed me, it had, but because my mind had shifted into a state I'd never known before. It wasn't rage, not really. Rage is fire, messy, loud, destructive. What I felt was colder, sharper. Something surgical. Something that calculated instead of screamed. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into the rising steam of my untouched coffee, watching it curl like a phantom above the cup. Outside, the sky hesitated, slowly lightening, as if even the sun wasn't sure it wanted to bring another day. Claire slept upstairs, no doubt sprawled across our bed with the easy entitlement of someone who believed she was still untouchable. By morning, my phone was a vault of evidence. I had labeled everything carefully, like case files in a courtroom. Cole Clinic 7:42 p.m. Audio clip 1. Cole Clinic 7:58 p.m. Silent video. GPS route. Screenshots. A transcript with the words, he has no idea. Time-stamped. Categorized. Each fragment harmless on its own, but together they formed a rope. Tightening, tightening. At work, I functioned on autopilot. Meetings, greetings, nods, the right words at the right times. Nobody saw what was happening behind my eyes. Nobody ever does, until it's too late. During my lunch break, I climbed to the 3rd floor, where the legal department sat. No appointment, no official reason. Just a few hypothetical questions about surveillance, privacy, marital property, asset division. The assistant slid a stack of brochures across the desk, her polite smile too knowing, as though she saw through me but had been trained to keep silent. Later, I sat in my car in the underground garage, heat pressing in through the cracked door. I stared at the building opposite, a low glass facade, tinted windows concealing everything. No security desk, no receptionist in sight. Just silence. My phone was in my hand before I realized it. I snapped photos of the sign, the parking lot, the black SUV parked exactly where it had been in my camera feed. Recognition sparked. That was his car. His tracks, left carelessly, as if the world wouldn't bother to look. I didn't know much about Dr. Adrian Cole. But that would change. Soon he would be the most dissected man within 5 miles of me. That evening, Claire was already home when I walked through the door. French music floated from the speakers, the kind of cheerful cafe soundtrack that pretended everything was fine. She stood at the counter chopping vegetables, smiling over her shoulder. "Hey, stranger. You're early." I kissed her cheek. Her skin was warm. "Thought I'd surprise you." She laughed lightly. "A good surprise." "I was thinking movie night." "Perfect," I said. And it was. A perfect chance to watch her play her part. Over dinner I studied her, the way she asked about colleagues whose names she barely remembered, the way she leaned in just enough to seem attentive. I answered smoothly, my voice calm, but inside I was already writing her ending. Afterward we curled on the couch, legs tangled, a romantic comedy flashing across the screen. She laughed at the right moments, touched my hand, tilted her head against mine. Her performance was flawless. But I knew the script now. And I had already begun rewriting it. People expect destruction to be loud. Shouts, slammed doors, tears, storms. But real collapse is quiet. It drifts down like ash after a fire, settling over everything until you realize nothing looks the same. That was how it began, her world unraveling, not with thunder, but with silence. It started with a single phone call from her gym. I was reading in the living room when her voice rose from the kitchen, tight with tension. "What do you mean, video?" A pause. "No, that can't." Silence. Then one word, flat and final, suspended. She walked into the room moments later, her face drained. Not red with anger, not streaked with tears, just empty, like someone had switched off the current behind her eyes. "They've put me on leave," she said slowly. "Anonymous complaint. Something about ethics. They claim there's a video." I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just watched, letting her own words curl around her neck like a rope tightening with each syllable. "That's terrible," I said softly. She searched my face for something, guilt, relief, satisfaction. I gave her none. A few days later, an email arrived from her licensing board. Someone had reported her for inappropriate conduct. The language was clinical, cold. Provisional suspension pending investigation. She didn't tell me. I found the letter left in the printer tray. Her name, her license number, stamped with the word, pending. Her smiles grew rare. She drifted through the house like a ghost, cooking by habit, watching TV without seeing. The calls from Adrian came less often than not at all. His name never passed my lips, but I saw the echo of it in her eyes each time she glanced at her phone, waiting for a vibration that never came. At night, I lay beside her, feeling the space stretch between us like a crack in concrete. Her breathing was shallow. Awake, pretending to sleep. Just like me. The whispers started slowly, the way they always do. Not accusations, not open gossip, just the kind of questions people ask when they already know the answer. One evening, our neighbor leaned against his fence and asked, "Everything all right over there?" in a tone that carried no expectation of reply. Claire's friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. Photos online where she'd once been tagged disappeared. The world was peeling away from her, inch by inch, like a skin she no longer fit into. One quiet night we sat across from each other at the dinner table, two untouched plates cooling between us. She barely lifted her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper. "Do you ever think that you can do everything right and still ruin everything?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I think if you ruin everything, you probably didn't do everything right." She said nothing else the entire night. The next morning I found her on the porch, staring at her phone, lost in some distance beyond the yard. She didn't look like the woman I had married. She looked like someone who had forgotten how to stand upright, like someone crumbling from the inside out. The silence between us had changed. It was no longer filled with secrets unsaid. It was thick with truths already spoken, through betrayals, through actions, through the echo of trust turned hollow. I felt no triumph, no victory, because it had never been about winning. It was about seeing her clearly, without the gloss, without the mask. I hadn't burned her world down. She had done that herself. All I had done was strike a single match and hold it steady, long enough for her to recognize the ashes. There was a cafe I'd passed 100 times but never entered. It sat quietly between a bookstore and a florist, its sign painted in cream-colored letters, "Morning Light Cafe." It wasn't flashy, didn't beg for attention. That morning, I needed a place with no history. A place that didn't know me. The air was crisp with that soft bite only late autumn carries, and I stepped inside, choosing a table by the window. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of lemon cake, though I had no hunger. It felt like the kind of order someone lighter might make. Someone unburdened. The waitress was young, tattooed, with a kind smile. "You look like you've been somewhere else today," she said as she poured my coffee. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." She left me alone after that. No prying, no second glance. Just kindness without weight. I took my first sip. Strong. Honest. No syrup, no froth, no disguise. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had tasted something that honest. My phone buzzed on the table, though I'd put it in airplane mode. A delayed notification broke through, divorce petition successfully filed. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The space across from me at the table was empty, and for the first time in months, that emptiness didn't feel like a wound. It felt like clarity. Like peace. People imagine endings as dramatic spectacles, courtrooms, slammed doors, shouting matches. But real endings are quiet. They happen in cafes, on mornings when nothing burns, when no one cries. Just silence. Just truth. I remembered something Claire once told me, back when things still felt simple. She had laughed, leaned against me, and said, "You're too quiet, Daniel. Like nothing ever touches you." She was wrong. Things touched me. They cut deep. They scarred. But they hadn't broken me. Not then, not now. I sat in that cafe, watching life drift by through the window, a mother guiding her child across the street, the florist arranging pumpkins in the window, a barista flipping the sign to advertise a cinnamon blend. The world kept moving, untouched by what had shattered inside my home. And for the first time in months, I let it. When the bell above the cafe door chimed, I didn't even lift my eyes. The world no longer demanded that I watch every movement, that I scan every expression for hidden lies. I didn't need to anymore. When I finally glanced up, it wasn't Claire. It was just another woman ordering tea, smiling politely at the barista. A moment so ordinary it felt like freedom. I took another sip of my coffee. This time it didn't taste like betrayal. It tasted clear, simple, like truth. And I swallowed it without flinching. I stayed there a while longer, the mug warming my hands, my mind heavy but oddly unclouded. Outside, the wind stirred leaves across the cobblestones. The world seemed in motion, but inside me there was stillness. Not triumph, not gloating, not even bitterness. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't wound anymore, but opens up like empty space, ready to be filled. I wasn't the man who stayed up all night watching his phone, dissecting every routine, every smile. I wasn't the man who hollowed himself out to understand her. I was simply me again. Later, I walked the streets as though seeing them new. The colors, the sounds, the sheer aliveness of things, none of it filtered through suspicion, none of it blurred by control. I stopped at a kiosk, bought a magazine I had no real reason to buy, just for the small luxury of flipping through meaningless pages. I sat on a bench, watched strangers pass, and found comfort in their ignorance. None of them knew what I had lived through. None of them carried my story. And that was fine. My pain belonged to me. My story too. And I no longer owed anyone an explanation. By the time I returned home, the house felt different. The walls hadn't shifted, the furniture hadn't moved, but the air was lighter, freer. Claire was gone, though fragments of her lingered, clothes in the closet, shoes by the door. Yet she felt more like a memory than a presence, like something that had already stepped back into the shadows. No shouting, no suitcases, no slammed doors. Just absence. A quiet exhale. A door closed softly. I wandered through the rooms, running my hand across surfaces that seemed sharper in their emptiness. It struck me how much of our lives had been routine, layers of habit hiding the silence beneath. Now, those layers had peeled away, leaving bare wood, bare glass, bare truth. I stood by the window with a glass of water, not wine, not the numbing rituals I had used to keep myself steady. Just water. Clear. Uncomplicated. My thoughts didn't wander to Adrian, or to what she had whispered in the dark, or to how many lies had been told. My thoughts were mine again. And for the first time, I realized I could still love. Not her. Not anymore. But someday, someone. Honestly. Fully. Without disguise. That night, I lay in a bed that no longer felt hollow. It finally belonged to me, not to the distance between two people divided by unspoken truths. No phone buzzing with hidden messages, no phantom sense of strangers. Just darkness, still and whole. I drifted into sleep without the weight of waiting for another betrayal. And when I woke, it wasn't with dread, but with something lighter. Something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. Sometimes healing isn't about dissecting the past, or explaining it, or trying to justify it. Sometimes it's about leaving it where it belongs, behind you. Not because you have to, but because, at last, you want to. The night was quiet, heavier than usual, but for the first time that weight didn't press on me, it lifted. I stood at the window, the glass of water in my hand catching the faint glow of the street lamp outside. The house felt hollow, but not in a way that wounded. It felt open, cleared of its disguises, its routines, its rehearsed performances. The silence that once suffocated me now belonged to me. It wasn't her silence anymore. It was mine. I walked through the room slowly, almost reverently, letting my fingers trace the edges of furniture, door frames, the banister worn smooth by years of hands that no longer touched. It struck me how different everything looked now, how much brighter, even though nothing had changed but the truth. The weight of lies had settled into every corner, every shadow, and now that they were gone, the space itself felt wider. It was like learning to breathe again. Upstairs, the bed waited. Not our bed anymore. Mine. No longer a stage for silence or distance, no longer a battlefield of unspoken suspicions. Just a bed. Just rest. I lay down and closed my eyes, not haunted by the question of where she was, or who she was with, or what she might be hiding. That part of my life had ended. I fell asleep not from exhaustion, not from defeat, but simply because I could. And when morning came, I woke with something I had nearly forgotten: ease. Not joy, not triumph, not even relief. Ease. The kind of ease that comes when the storm has passed and you realize you're still standing. I went downstairs, poured myself coffee, and sat in the same kitchen where it had all begun, with a kiss that tasted wrong. Only now, the bitterness wasn't in my mouth. It was gone. I thought back on it all, the silence, the taste, the whispers, the shadows I once tried to ignore. I remembered the way she laughed when she thought I would never know, the way she leaned into another man's hand as though mine had never been there. And I realized none of it mattered anymore. I had seen her truth, and I had chosen mine. Life outside the window moved as it always had. Cars passed. Dogs barked. Neighbors trimmed hedges. The world didn't pause for my heartbreak, and that was the point. It never does. It keeps going, and now so would I. Not as the man who was betrayed. Not as the man who stalked silence and suspicion. But simply as myself, stripped bare, sharpened, still alive. People think the end of a marriage is fire, screaming, chaos. But sometimes the true end is quiet. It's a man sitting at his kitchen table, sipping coffee, knowing the past has burned itself out and left nothing but ash. And in that ash, strangely, lies something new. Not hope. Not yet. But space. Space enough for something honest to grow again, when the time is right. And until then, there is silence. My silence. The kind that no one can take away.
Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, shocked you, or simply made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment, your thoughts, your story, your truth. Subscribe for more raw, real, and unforgettable confessions. And if this story made you feel seen, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. You're not alone here. This channel is a safe space for those who've been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt.